Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I think it's time for a creepy story thread, real or fiction. I'll start with a true story about something that actually happened to me. I live in a somewhat rural area. One day a friend and I decided to explore the woods across the street from the local hardware store in the middle of the night. We followed a trail we found until we came across an old cemetery. We had our flashlights out and looked at the gravestones, all the while wondering why there was an old graveyard in the middle of the woods. The most recent grave we found was from the 1800s. We took note that the place looked like it was still maintained, the grass was mowed, there were no weeds, the place was raked, and so on. We decided to go home and get some sleep. When I got home, I realized I left my hat at the cemetery. The next day I followed the trail back to the graveyard. The cemetery was not there, just a clearing overgrown with grass and weeds. My hat was lying on the ground. I swear this is a true story. True story. Happened to me before I moved. I'm an Aussie and I live out in the country. As in, the next house is about a mile away out in the country. I live on a couple of acres with a swamp at the back. My computer room is on the side of the house facing the swamp, with a couple of big-ass windows looking out towards it. So one night I look up from the internet and find that the moon's out and everything's really lit up. I look toward the swamp and there's this nearly impossibly tall thing standing out there, twitching really fast and snapping back and forth violently. Pretty creepy in itself, but I get up to see what it is, because part of my mind is saying it's a tree or something with an animal in it that's making it move. The second I get up to that window, I see it's not a tree, it's this skinny monster-looking bastard with its arms flattened against its sides, twitching and snapping around. That's not even the thing that sent me running out of the house swearing. When I saw that it wasn't a tree, it looked up. It had little, perfectly round, white eyes. They were sunken way down, or at least looked like it. Then it starts racing up the backyard towards the window. I scream, "Oh shit," turn around, and run out to my car. I can hear it come running around the side of the house, and the noises it made. It was grunting and moaning and cackling inhumanly. I was in my car and starting it when I saw those blank, white eyes looking at me from around the side of my house. Screw that noise, I was shitting castle walls. Alright, since everything was lit up, I could tell you what it looked like as best as I can. It was tall and blackish purplish, had no mouth or nose, a sort of triangular head, and looked like it was all slimy. As for the house, it was in Caroli, Queensland. I sold it to some guy and his wife. There were more, but none as brick-shitting as the SwampDweller. Anyway, here's some more before I moved. I was walking up my driveway once at night and some bloated, burned thing the size of a Doberman came right past me, grunting like a pig. It doesn't even look at me. I woke up one morning from sleeping on the couch and saw two little deformed men looking in at me from a window, grinning. They had black teeth. One morning, very early, I walked out onto the backyard patio and saw a giant, and I mean bigger than a cow, giant skinless dog thing that looked like it was wrapped in cellophane walking towards the swamp. A few of my mates and I went out into the swamp during the day and saw the mud had literally thousands of prints in it, like a lot of things had been walking. Some of them were as big as us individually. Here's one that proved I wasn't going batshit, since my friend saw it as well as my dog. It was another night when the moon lit everything up, and my friend was sitting and having a few beers with me out on the patio. The dog was sitting between us. All of a sudden we hear this weird, low mumbling. By low I mean guttural, not human voices low. We all look up to see this twisted over, pale thing that had, I shit you not, footless needle-thin stilts for legs. It walks right by us, the skin on its face twitching, cricks its head around at us, mumbles something, and then walks around the side of the house. My friend is staring at where it went out of sight, the dog is growling its head off, and I'm wondering what is wrong with my house. Even more. I was walking back from a party across the road at 6 or 7 at night, or somewhere around that time, and I looked over to my left and saw a big pimple-looking thing grafted onto a tree. It's shaking back and forth and there are giggling sounds coming from inside it. I ran back into my house and barricaded the door because I had the thought in my head that it would hatch or some shit. My friend once scared the shit out of me hammering on my door, and when I let him and he told me he saw this big spider thing made of arms. Human arms, anon, human fucking arms. I was turning the lights off in my computer room when I looked at the window and saw that it was covered in a mouth. On the outside, of course, so I was looking into at least 4 foot long, 4 foot wide mouth covered in needle teeth. That, my dear X, was when I said fuck it, and moved.
Well, after reading your stories I'm terribly creeped out now, 'cause I've had similar experiences, but I thought I'd be too screwed up to tell them. I live in Austria, Europe, so, sorry for my bad English, you can say in the middle of the Alps. During summer, I live in a house near a bog. The next house is about 6 miles away. One night I was taking a walk round the house, to check the wooden fence I built to keep animals out of my backyard, 'cause I heard a cracking sound. And then I saw a similar shit like you, a skinny, twitching, blackish creature with round eyes, about 2 to 3 meters high, can't say exactly, 'cause it was about 20 meters away, with a small head and long arms and legs, standing in the middle of the bog between 2 trees. I pointed my flashlight towards it, and its eyes reflected the light like the eyes of a cat, and it stopped twitching. Then it howled or screamed in a very deep, guttering voice and started running towards me. I was scared like shit, dropped my flashlight and ran back into the house. I didn't hear anything after I shut the door behind me, but I wasn't able to sleep all night. Next day I checked around the house, found my flashlight again, but no sign of that thing. I talked with a guy, the farmer who owns the next house, about that, and he told me that it was an Alper, a cursed being, that takes the form of a dark twisted man or giant dog, and that all farmers in the bog have seen them several times. Another local legend tells of the Handyman, a lord of the woods or demon, which can take different forms, for example a tall black man who screams loudly, if approached. It says if you stare at him without respect or taunt him, he will get aggressive. Now, I don't go out of the house after nightfall.
Oh shit, same as both of you, only I live in Tasmania. I lived on my father's farm as a teenager, and he coincidentally had a swampy/boggy area down near an unused pasture. I was walking around there during dusk when I heard this soft creaking crinkling sound. I turn around and standing in the trees is, essentially, what both of you described. Only this one had big bent horns or ears. It's twitching one of its shoulders back and forth, and when I look at it, it grins. It has human teeth, but they all look like eye teeth to me, and they're all coated in saliva. I just stare at it, until it lets out this horrible howling roar and starts sprinting at me. I ran off, screaming for my dad, and never again did I go down near that bog until we moved in the summer.
On the east coast of Australia where I live, we have a couple of things which may or may not be hanging around. Yowie's Australian Bigfoots are thought by a lot of people to be around. When I was a kid I lived in an isolated house set deep in the bush, and a few times some odd footprints turned up, large and set further apart than a human's stride would make them. My family never really gave a shit about it, so no casts were ever taken. Probably a prank of some kind. Large cat things of some kind. In my small town where I've spent most of my life, a lot of people I grew up with prefer not to walk too far out into the bush alone, especially towards night. If you go out alone or in a very small group into the bush, most times it will be fine. But there are times when a strong sensation of being watched, or perhaps stalked, will suddenly come. You can be walking along, and then you'll feel it, as surely as if you'd seen a pair of eyes looking at you through the trees. Several times I've been with 1 or 2 other people, and we've all suddenly felt it, and turned around and gone back. I first thought there was a large cat of some kind around the area when I was a kid. I suddenly felt stalked one day, and somehow it seemed very clear to me that it was a cat. I would have passed it off as silly kid ideas completely, but several people who also grew up here have said the same thing, and without my having mentioned it first. One story I've heard, from a guy who isn't the type to make things up, happened about 5 years ago. He and someone else were walking in the nearby national park, kind of exploring, not following any of the paths that there are. The watched, stalked, creepy feeling came upon him, and the other guy that was there. They kept going at first, but then, one of them noticed, partially obscured by some grass, a skull on the ground. Human skulls in the bush would have to be scary enough normally, but they looked at it, and there were 2 large holes in it, like the teeth marks of some large teeth. They shat bracks and ran. Another friend of mine was once further out in the national park, in an out-of-the-way valley people rarely go near. They heard a very, very loud roar from some animal. They said it sounded fairly close and was terrifying. Again, bricks were shat, and they fled. The only story of anything actually being sighted near where I live happened late last spring. My best friend had gone for a walk in the bush up on the slopes behind our house. There's some waterfalls and a bit of ice rainforest there, but nobody ever goes up though due to train tracks and difficult slopes, lantana barriers, etc. So, this guy walks up there, and he goes a bit further than either of us would normally go. He climbs over a couple of rocks, and there are these cute baby animals of some kind wandering and playing in front of a partial cave formed by slipped rocks on a steep rocks embankment near the creek. We were a few meters away and moved slowly. They saw him, but didn't pay him any attention. There were 3 of them. They were a tawny yellowish beigeish color with slightly darker extremities. They had the look of a baby animal about a week old, but they were the size of a not quite full-grown house cat. He said they looked like some kind of cat, but also quite dog-like. They had cat-shaped ears, but their faces were longer than a cat's. He spent a few minutes watching them and wondering what they were. Then he got scared of what if their mother came along and saw him there, and he came back. He wanted to go back with me and a camera, but there wasn't enough time to go back before dark that day. After that, he was too scared to go alone, and I was too scared to go with him. I regret my cowardice now, though would really like to have seen them, or at least gotten some hair samples if they weren't still there.
In Central Australia, there is an unremarkable service station along a straight and barren stretch of road. If you walk straight in and ask for the key, you will be given an unremarkable key attached to an unremarkable piece of wood. The key will unlock a door at the service station, leading to an impossibly long stepped corridor, dimly lit from an unseen source. If you follow these stairs, you will begin to hear hungry cries of birds of prey that grow louder as you descend. After an amount of time, the light will vanish, leaving you in the dark, and a rasping voice will ask for your desires. For each desire, you will experience all the sensations, unforgettable, branded into your memory, of bodily mutilation, of being torn asunder by impossible strength, of having an arm slowly flayed, each nerve individually pulled from your flesh. You may speak as many desires as your sanity can take. Then you must turn and return up the steps and never look back. Return the key and go about your life. Your desires will be granted, but you will always have to live with the memories given to you in that dark place.
I used to live in Tasmania. It's a little island state below mainland Australia near Hobart, which is one of the oldest cities, and unlike the rest of Australia, most of the houses around there have some history. I lived in this run-down handyman's dream my parents had bought when I was born, when I was about 60 years old. I have a lot of these weird half-suppressed memories from when I was 3 or 4 about an old man who visited me when I was in bed, or I'd see him around the house. Then there's a big gap, until I turned 9, then shit started happening. Unexplainable shadows passing me by in the hallway. Fire would gut and go out for no reason while I was watching. An old-style light shade that was screwed into the roof broke free and smashed my Lego castle one night in my room. Pots and pans would start banging in the drawers when I went to get a drink late at night. I'm in a cold sweat writing about it now. The big ones always occurred in our bathroom. I'd lock the door to have a shower, and the door would be unlocked. One time I heard a huge crash, and the door had been flung open while I was showering. Just the wind, my parents said, but screw that. Door was locked. When my younger brother was born, my dad decided to build a new room onto the house himself. So he acquired the blueprints for the house. He spent about 3 months building it, and by this time I was going insane. I refused to stay in the bathroom for longer than 2 or 3 minutes. I'd sleep with my head under the blankets because I was afraid of the shadows. I'd avoid going to the toilet for more than 24 hours. And the shit kept escalating. I'd hear knocking in my wardrobe, see someone walking past my window. It culminated when I began to see the shadows and hear humming coming from the hallway. I can't remember the tune. It was flat and emotionless, but had a very national anthem feel to it. After the new room was finished and my brother was born, the events died off for a bit. My dad went back to his work, and things returned to normal. I thought it was over. Then, when my brother was 6 months old, shit started happening around his room. The clown in his bedroom, it was suspended on the roof, sitting in a little ring, would stop spinning and lock its eyes on me when I entered. My little brother would react as if someone was in the room when no one was. He'd stop crying or start crying randomly. Difficult baby, my nan said, but that wasn't it. When I turned 10, my father decided to do some renovations on our old bathroom, and he examined the blueprints. That was when he realized there was half a meter of empty space between our bathroom mirror and the toilet.
Great, that's what we'll do. We'll knock it out and build an alcove.
My dad took a few weeks off work. He bought the materials to build an extension to the bathroom. Then he removed the mirror and knocked the wall in. The hollow space behind the mirror was just that, hollow. It was a square cube about the size of a large picture frame. Inside was a small wooden box, unlabeled. My parents pried it open, only to find ashes inside. The previous owner had himself cremated and interred in the house. Behind the bathroom mirror, We scattered his ashes over Point Nelson, and I've never experienced anything remotely paranormal since. And I don't care to. A year later, we left the house and built our own. At least here I know there's nothing behind the mirrors, but I still can't spend more than 10 minutes in a bathroom, and I'll shat bricks every time I hear a strange noise or the light blows in the bathroom.
Camping. I don't do camping anymore. It happened in 2002. Used to go hiking and camping by myself between Sofala and Hill End, New South Wales, Australia. I'd park my car along the Turin River and hike for 6 or 7 hours to my favorite spot for a bit of fishing, shooting and gold fossicking for a few days. Where I camp there is no one around for miles, and I'm usually by myself. I enjoy being alone in the wilderness, until for the last time in 2002. Went to sleep in my tent at 8 and woke up suddenly at about 1 in the morning with sounds of people whispering loudly outside. I crawled out of my tent with rifle in hand and heartbeat racing. The surroundings seemed to be all lit up with a dull orange light not from a campfire, and could see things moving about in the shadows and light. I shouted out that I was a camper and that I was armed, but I got no response. Whatever they were, they just seemed to be watching me even though I couldn't make out what they were. Standing there alone and shit scared in the dead of night, they started to whisper loudly again, and what seemed to me they were moving closer. I fired a few rounds over them and everything went quiet. I grabbed my rucksack, gathered some things and proceeded in the opposite direction. About halfway back to my car, I noticed a bright orange light flying in the dark sky heading upwards from where I camped. Driving back to Sydney, I thought about reporting this but decided against it. Now I don't do camping anymore.
I've been doing this since I was 9, usually on my own. I've always been attracted to strange, remote places. Only there aren't so many in Australia, everything is too new and too planned, or dozed quickly for redevelopment. A few cool ones. When I was 14, I wandered through an abandoned set of miners' flats. Still can't work out why they were abandoned, but there was still a lot of shit in them. Newspapers from 1999 still open on the table, canned food in cupboards, refrigerators and other large appliances, and even one bed still made up. When I was 10, I discovered the underground sewer system in Hobart, disused, was still mostly intact, once you pried a few boards loose. I spent hours wandering them, but nothing really interesting down there. I did, however, find a direct path from my house to the downtown movie theater that took 15 minutes on a bike. I found a huge fence in the middle of smack bang nowhere about 2 years ago. I was out driving and got hopelessly lost. It was really gothic, like 3 meters high and spiked. I walked until I found the gate, which read Bavard Keys, and was in the same style of the fence. Very rusted. There was a brand new chain and lock on the fence, as well as 3 or 4 signs warning people away for unspecified reasons. I jumped it, of course, and wandered for a bit but couldn't find anything too good. In the distance there was a hill rising. It looked like some kind of open-cut mining, but it was a long way away and it was getting late, plus I was still lost. I've always meant to go back and check it out. From Google I've ascertained that Bavard Keys is a land reserve and nothing should be going on there. Recently, I've been checking out this place outside town. It's down a road about 6 km long, and on the barbed wire fence are a lot of warnings. I cut a few links open up out of sight and broke in. Interesting place, but nothing too special. Some open pits with water and plants in them, a couple of deep holes, piles of trash. I've been back about 6 times, occasionally with mates, and once we found an esky near the entrance. It was full of small sealed cups with the word sample written on them and labeled 1 to 30. Probably just some botanical testing site, but I like to think they're manufacturing the new zombie virus. Just some tips for the serious urban explorer that I've learned along the way. Take a backpack and fill it with a pack of 10 disposable filter masks. As a lot of places are abandoned due to asbestos and lead poisoning, followed by the company being too cheap to fix it. Minor first aid, band-aids, disinfectant, bandages, as these places can really cut you up. A disposable camera. For the money shots. Pen and paper. Extra phone credit. Masking tape / packing tape, colored. I've used it in the past to mark areas I've already checked, so I don't spend my time wandering in circles. Take a torch but rely on your night vision, torches get you caught. Take some bolt cutters. Optional, these are the difference between a police warning and a police booking, but they come in damned handy. Leave this in your car, you never know when the urge to urban explore will come over you. And try and research the building/facility before you go in.
Back when I was in high school, myself and a few friends spent the weekend at a friend's house since his parents were out of town. One night we are all getting ready to crash out in the living room and we hear what sounds like a little girl's voice say, "Come play with me." We all just kind of stopped and stared, and after about 30 minutes of wondering what the hell that was, and seeing if everyone had heard it, we gave up and decided to crash out, despite being spooked as hell. About an hour or so after we had killed the lights, my friend's remote-controlled car darted off the top of the entertainment center, causing the half of us that weren't asleep yet to sit up looking at each other like, what the hell? The car ran for maybe 5 seconds and then shut off. Shitting bricks, we woke up our friend who lived there, trying to figure out where the controller for the car was, thinking him or someone else was playing a trick on us, and he pointed at his desk. We go and check, and sure as shit it's got no batteries in it. Well, that means that someone else has a remote on the same frequency or something, or so we thought, until we checked the remote-controlled car to find out it didn't have any goddamned batteries in it either. After having woken everyone up by now with the noise we were making, accusing each other of trying to play a prank on the rest of us, we heard it again, the voice saying, "Come play with me." We are all about one step from shitting our pants by now, and a few of the guys were packing to leave. Still thinking someone was playing a prank, and I was determined to find out who I along with 2 others stayed. We sat around for another hour or so waiting for something to happen, when the homeowner decides he's bored and is going to watch a movie. I don't recall the movie he put in, but every time he hit the play button, the damn thing would eject itself. Over and over he got up trying to get it to play, and every time he sat down, it would eject. We all started joking about how the little girl must not want to watch that movie, and to be funny my friend calls out, "Well fine, then what the hell do you want to watch?" We all busted up laughing, and then immediately shut up when we heard this thud noise. Staring at his movie rack collection, his family's copy of The Little Mermaid had fallen off the rack. A few other things happened when we stayed there, but this one sticks out the most since there was a bunch of us there to witness it.
I posted this earlier this week, but I think it was at some crazy AM hours and kinda went by unnoticed. The story isn't scary at all, just ghosty. Anyway, this actually happened. About a week ago, one of my granduncles, his name was Edel, died from leukemia. The events I'm going to relate happened back in Miami. I'm in Chicago, so I wasn't there to witness, but much of my family was, and they seem to corroborate each other, and they've never been the types to make shit up or even believe in ghosts. Anyway, when Edel was on his last few breaths, one of the things he described was how Geraldo, a family member who had died decades ago, was there, and that he was fading in and out. Shortly after saying that, he passed away. Some time later, my grandmother, who was Edel's sister, has a sort of dizzy spell that leads into a trance-like state, at which point she suddenly adopts Edel's mannerisms, posture, phrases, etc., and begins to ask other family members how they will make sure that Isabel, Edel's now widow, will be taken care of, wanting assurance that she'll be all right. This soon passes, and my grandmother has no memory of saying anything or doing anything peculiar at that time, despite it being witnessed by my parents and a slew of other relatives. In a different event that occurred around that time, my great-grandmother, Edel's mother, she's in her late 90s, barely lucid, and bedridden. Personally, I don't know why she's still alive or what keeps her going, started talking about how she saw Edel and Geraldo in the room with her, despite the fact that no one told her that Edel was dead or that his final words had been about Geraldo. When my Uncle Tito showed up to visit my great-grandmother, her reaction to seeing Tito was to look up and say Mariposo. Mariposo was a bit of a nickname. Insult that Edel had for Tito when they were both far younger, and my great-grandma really would have no reason to suddenly use it. So now my family has the strong impression that somehow Edel has been coming back and has been getting channeled through his sister and his mother, to a limited extent.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.